So the Caribbean is a hotbed. Fighter jets from the U.S. Navy and the U.S. Air Force are screaming across the Caribbean. Any day now, this could kick off. But Venezuela's Air Force just went on red alert. And this is happening at a point where President Trump and Maduro had a phone call where President Trump asked him to leave. He was like, hey, pack up your stuff. You're done. So the whole world is holding its breath right now on whether America is about to light up the region and what deal might go down. Will Maduro leave peacefully or not? He's basically said, yeah, I'll leave, but I don't want to cede power to the military. Interesting. So you're saying that you don't want to leave. But that's the scene right now. Venezuela's Air Force is hitting full red alert. They had a big Air Force Day parade last week, and there they showcased their Su-30s and F-16s, and they put on a massive display for Venezuela as far as that goes. They're basically saying we're ready. President Trump was on the line with Maduro just a few days after that red alert parade, and he straight up told the guy, pack your bags and bail before things get ugly. And the phone call, from what I'm hearing, it reported that President Trump offered safe passage to Maduro and his family, or they were going to have to face the music. So basically the ultimate ultimatum just happened. But what we're seeing now is more aggressive patrols from Venezuela. They're going up and down the coast. They're loading and using lots more GPS jamming equipment. And there's whispers around the clock of a U.S. strike that could happen within hours at any point. So you got to know this stuff because we don't know when this is going to kick off. And to me, we got to stay updated with it. This is raw aviation muscle from the U.S. Navy, raw sea power from the U.S. Navy, and raw aviation muscle from the U.S. Air Force, and even the Marines are in on this. So this clash could happen real time. But I want to talk to you about the timing of this. So why Venezuela's Air Force is going on red alert right now, like it happening right now after this phone call. And we'll talk about what the implications might be and maybe some air battles that we'll see here in the next few days or next few weeks. So let's start with the stars of Venezuela's parade that are now literally on red alert right now. That's the Su-30 Mk2, and that's Venezuela's workhorse. So this is what they would be looking at to go up against the F-18s if anything of theirs was going to go up against F-18s. To them, this is their beast, and it's been their go-to since the early 2000s. It's a twin-engine fighter jet. It's a flanker variant, and it's a stretched out aircraft from some of the earlier models to give it the ability to carry more fuel. It's also got the ability for super maneuverability. Some of these actually have thrust vectoring. It looks like these that Venezuela has don't actually have the thrust vectoring, but they're still relatively maneuverable. You can think of them like Russia's version of the F-15C, and it does have the ability to do that Cobra maneuver, which is essentially like the Top Gun maneuver where it flips physics and it basically stops midair. Power plant wise, it's rocking two AL31FP turbofans. Each of those push out about 27,000 pounds of thrust with afterburner that lets it hit Mach 2,000 feet per minute. Doesn't have external tanks if it's climbing up that high, likely, just so it has the ability to get up that high. But they also lug external pods, and those are basically there for maritime strikes. They're there to potentially do jamming against F-18s, against F-35s, and it's built tough. The Su-30 is a tough built aircraft. It's that Russian Soviet tank of an aircraft. So again, it's going to be no easy day with the Venezuelan Air Force on red alert. The U.S. Navy is now going to be ready to go, and I guarantee there's some ready rooms on the USS Ford, that super carrier, where they are studying and dialing into what they might face if they go up against the Su-30. But then you've got the F-16A. That's the Fighting Falcon. That's the American classic aircraft that Venezuela has. That is now on red alert as well. It's a single engine setup with that Pratt & Whitney F-100. Cranks about 25,000 pounds of thrust. Can get up to Mach 2. So again, you've got Mach capable aircraft that the U.S. Navy and the U.S. Air Force is now having to go up against. And with the B-52 flybys, that's a very vulnerable aircraft. So you have to make sure that there is a combat air patrol escort that is with that B-52 at all times, especially with the Venezuelan Air Force now on red alert, because those flanker pilots are going to have an itchy trigger finger, and they're going to want to be the one that takes down the B-52, even if they go down in the process. If they can get off a shot, it's really hard to deflect that missile or to do anything to that missile after it leaves the rail of the Su-30 or the F-16. So again, the U.S. U.S. Navy F-18 pilots got to be super dialed in when it comes to protecting the B-52s, especially now with the Venezuelan Air Force on red alert. And it's not just the Air Force. Maduro actually put the entire military on red alert. He's recalling troops. So whether this is to give him a better bargaining position to get more of what he wants as far as where he goes, if he does plan on actually leaving the country, maybe he just thinks it's too hot, it's heating up too much, and he does decide to leave, or he's actually doubling down, getting the Air Force ready, getting the military ready, and he's actually just crazy enough to go head to head with the U.S. Navy and the U.S. Air Force. So we'll see how that goes. But again, the F-16, that's more for their short leg patrols. There's not the ability to aerial refuel in Venezuela. So F-16 shorter leg patrols, Su-30, a lot longer distances or higher loiter time. But again, I would say the F-16 might even be better for quicker scrambles because you got less maintenance. You got one engine compared to the two engines on the Su-30, even though Russia is likely shipping in parts right now and maybe even having some of their pilots fly those Su-30s to help Venezuela get the edge. And I'll do a full video breakdown on that. But again, both of these aircraft, they're aging a bit, but Venezuela's got probably a dozen or so, maybe 20 Su-30s and around 20 F-16s that can get up and can go up against high value targets. Again, Venezuelan Air Force pilots are likely going to try to target the high value targets, the B-52s, the AWACS. They would love to get some sort of a ship weapon off of an F-16 or off of a Su-30. We've seen videos of those Su-30s carrying those anti-ship weapons. They would love to get one of those off at the USS Ford. That would be a dream come true for them. But speaking of that, what do these jets pack under the wing? Because the armament, when these jets are on red alert, the armament is really going to take the star of the show at this point. So the Su-30 Mk2, it's definitely wired for both air-to-air and air-to-ground. It's got an R-77 active guided radar missile that can launch probably over 60 nautical miles away. Again, and that means they could take off right away. And if there was a B-52 along the coast, they could launch it very quickly. Again, they would want to get up to altitude, but they might try to take off, stay low, stay at 50 feet off the ground, try to avoid any radars, and then launch that R-77 active guided radar missile. So that's what the B-52 really has to look out for. And that's likely why we've seen the E-2D Hawkeye flying with the B-52 and the F-18 to make sure that they don't get, for lack of a better term, cornholed, because you don't want someone coming from below you and then popping out of a cloud and then firing one of those R-77s, because at that point, there's really no way to flare that thing off since it is a radar-guided missile. But then speaking of flaring off, they've also got the A-812 Adder. That is an IR, so infrared launch, and that's why likely in a dogfight with these Su-30s, the F-18 pilots would really need to remember to get out of Afterburner. Don't be an Afterburner if you're getting into a dogfight with the Su-30s. Trust me, just don't do it. Stay clear of Afterburner because that's an all-aspect missile and it's infrared capable, so it's off-bore sight capable. But how good is the training? Again, we don't know. But with the Venezuelan Air Force on red alert, them having trouble getting parts, that A340 that tried to get in there, the U.S. basically redirected. So are there Russian pilots now, and they're helping them out. But here's the big thing that we got to be careful about, and that's the KH-31 anti-ship missile. It's a supersonic missile, and we've actually seen Su-30s flying with this thing. It can launch at over 100 nautical miles, and it uses active radar to slam into carriers or escort ships, and it's got autonomous guidance with electronic countermeasures actually built in, and Russia's helping them update all of that. So the F-16, that's what they're going to think of more of a quick patrol aircraft with AIM-9s. They've probably got R-77 capabilities on that as well. And then when it comes to the longer range attacks beyond visual range, they're definitely thinking Su-30s. That's going to be their go-to as far as what aircraft they want to really protect Maduro's castle at the end of the day. Venezuela is basically staring down the barrel of U.S. air power at this point. And no offense, Maduro, you're cool and all, but the U.S.'s air power is basically light years ahead of yours because of the carrier strike group specifically. And again, fourth generation jets, F-18 Super Hornets, those are twin engine speed demons, 1,200 miles per hour with a 1,200 nautical mile combat radius. They're armed with AIM-120 AMRAAMs that outrange anything Maduro's got, active radar missiles. But the real nightmare for Maduro, and he probably knows this, if he's actually thinking clearly, the stealth assets like the F-35 Lightning II that are deployed into Puerto Rico right now. The Marines are flying those. They're also Air Force F-35s that are based in Florida. And those are single engine stealth jets with that APG-81. Basically shows you everything in the battle space at all times. There's no hiding. Depicts SAM's surface-to-air missiles. So really there's not a lot that Maduro can do to try to protect his castle at this point. And since the Venezuelan Air Force is on red alert, the U.S. is now going to have to link up with all the different assets, the fighter jets, the ships, all the different Aegis systems. They're going to have to start sharing that fleet-wide and throughout the Air Force, because you have to know what's happening at all times. A little austere strip in the middle of the, some hidden strip in a valley in Venezuela, Su-30 takes off and there's an F-35 that's a little too far away to protect it, while a B-52 or an RC-135 flies by. That could be a huge disaster. So you've got to make sure that the threat is being honored. And one of the things I hinted at before was the E-2D Hawkeye. That thing teaming up with the F-18s gives them really an edge that really can't be countered by Venezuela, because those things have that ASA radar, that massive ASA radar. Think of like 5 or 6 F-35s, the power of 5 or 6 F-35s up there in that section above the cockpit. And that's going to be huge for going up against this main threat, and that's Venezuela's S-300 system. Because when it comes to Venezuela's Air Force, they're not just getting the F-16 and the Su-30 ready, the S-300s are on red alert as well. And that might be one of the main reasons why the Trump administration decided to close the airspace. They didn't want any civilian traffic flying through and being confused for a military jet and then getting shot down by an S-300. That would just be totally tragic, no matter what country that was from. And then with U.S. air power, MQ-9 Reapers are going to be one of the stars of the show, operated by the Marines, the Navy. This is the go-to. This is the go-to plane. Literally going to be in Top Gun 3. It's going to be MQ-9 Reapers that are going to be the stars at this point. But then the RQ-4 is also a very capable drone that will be in there. But again, the U.S. Navy teamed up with these assets. You could even team them up with an XBAT, which is something that they say isn't quite released yet. It's built by Shield AI. Very capable platform that could do intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, and could basically flip the script on Maduro, knowing what's going on before Maduro even knows what's happening. That's the power of the technology that's now being intertwined into Shield AI's XBAT. When you think about Hive Mind, that's the way it communicates. It's kind of like an Aegis combat system, but the modernized version of that and an airborne version of that. So if there's any chance of getting that thing airborne now, I hope the Department of War is getting that up there for some testing in intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. You team all those drones together with the F-35. Now you can really protect the RC-135 and protect the B-52 from Venezuela's Air Force. Because again, one lucky shot, one golden BB, and it takes down an RC-135. That's a national disaster that we just can't afford, especially now with Venezuela's Air Force going on red alert. Okay, so for some hypotheticals, let's just say that Maduro tells Trump to shove it and decides to jam the Su-30s radar, which is communicating with those missiles, luckily with the R-77s. So at the correct distance, the XBAT sends as much jamming energy as they can towards those 4 Su-30s, basically making their radars shut off. Their screens just go black inside their jet. And luckily, those R-77 missiles burn out and fall to the ground prior to getting close to the P-8. But the P-8 turns, makes its way out. That was a close call. For the second hypothetical, word leaks of U.S. Navy SEALs that are prepping a helo insertion near Caracas for a high-value target snatch. Could be Maduro, could be other people in the top echelons of the regime. Maduro goes all in and he directs his F-16s to launch from Maracay. They run a low-level ingress toward Aruba, where a U.S. AWACS, Airborne Warning and Control System, are stacked in orbits tracking anything coming out of Venezuela. But at this point, F-35s are also nearby, and they see the F-16s coming to target the helicopters that are going to insert the Navy SEALs. So they hold the helicopters as far out as possible without putting them in a position where they're going to run out of fuel and can't make the mission complete. So the F-35s then commit up high. They're above 50,000 feet. They lock on to these F-16s and they fire a volley of AIM-120Ds. That's that longer range AMRAAM. At this point, the F-35 snips the missile and they start doing a counter attack just in case they have to get within visual range. At this point, 6 F-16s are blown up with those AIM-120Ds, but one sneaks through. The F-35 versus the F-16, again, you have to be aggressive because that F-16 is going to have the ability for an infrared missile shot with an AIM-9. As they get in close, the F-35 gets a good visual identification, locks on off bore sight with their AIM-9X, fires off that AIM-9X, and splashes that last F-16. And then the helicopters have a clear path to Caracas for their high-value target raid. These are a couple different options that we could see play out in the next few days or the next few weeks. What do you think plays out? Would love to hear what you think. I'll keep you posted. But again, Venezuela's Air Force on red alert is a serious deal, and we'll see what Maduro decides to do. At this point, he's kind of like a wolf backed into a corner. We don't know. Any given day could bring any situation. So I'll keep you posted as this develops. Go ahead and follow me on Instagram, follow me on X. Appreciate you guys being here. If you would, just watch this video right here. When you watch this video right here, it helps the channel grow exponentially, and I would greatly appreciate it. I'll see you on this video right here. This is Ryan, also known as Max Afterburner, signing off.